Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Arunachala Ramanaya Namaskaram. Today I've been asked to talk about Sri Arunachala Pancharatnam. This is the last of the 5 hymns, Arunachala Stuti Panchakam, and it is the only one that Bhagavan composed originally in Sanskrit. In fact, it's the only complete work that Bhagavan composed originally in Sanskrit and later translated into Tamil. There are 2 verses that he composed first in Sanskrit and then in Tamil, but they are just miscellaneous verses. That is Hridaya Gurha Madhye, which he later translated as verse 8 of Uludunapya Anubandham, and Deham Rinmaya, which he later translated as verse 10 of Uludunapya Anubandham. But those are just 2 stray verses. This is the only complete work that Bhagavan originally composed in Sanskrit. In various books and various printed sources, there are slight variations on how exactly Bhagavan came to compose this. I also heard slight variations from old devotees who were there in those days. I heard both from Kunju Swami and from Natanananda. So from all the various sources, what I think is the most probable account, but we will never know for certain because everyone has their own slightly different version. But it seems under circumstances that nobody is quite sure about, Bhagavan one day composed the first verse, Karunapurna Subdabde Kabalita Gana Vishwarupa Kiranavalya Arunachala Paramatman Aruno Bhava Chitta Kanja Subhikasaya. It seems sometime later, this verse came to the notice of Kavyaganta Ganapati Sastri. It seems he had, on the request of Pranavananda, who was formerly known as I can't remember. He was the Munshi for F.H. Humphreys, and he was also the uncle of Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan. He later took sannyasa under the name of Pranavananda. It seems he had requested Ganapati Muni to compose a song on the Guru, which Ganapati Muni did. And then some devotees wanted a Mangalam verse, a benedictory verse. And then someone mentioned that Bhagavan had composed this verse, Karuna Purna Sudabde. So this is how Kavyaganta came to know about this verse. So when he saw it, he liked it a lot because it's in perfect Arya Vrita, a beautiful meter in Sanskrit. So he asked Bhagavan to compose some more verses in the same meter. So Bhagavan, it seems, composed 2 more verses, the 2nd verse and the 3rd verse. The 3rd verse, Bhagavan is clearly describing the path of Atma Vichara. So Ganapati Sastri said, this is on the Jnana Marga. Please also compose verses on yoga, bhakti, and karma. So Bhagavan composed the next 2 verses, in which actually karma is touched upon only very obliquely in the final verse, but the main subject of verses 4 and 5 is yoga and bhakti. This, I think, is the most likely version from all the different versions, slightly different versions that I've heard. But anyway, to come to the actual content, there are various ways we can look at it, but one way of viewing it is the first verse is a prayer Bhagavan made, and we can view the other 4 verses all as being somewhat like a commentary or an expansion of what he says in the first verse. That's one way of viewing it. And it's slightly in that line, but I will try and explain it today. So the first verse, Bhagavan sang, Karuna Purna Sarabde Kabalita Gana Vishwarupa Kirana Balya Arunachala Paramatman Aruno Baba Chitta Kanjusuvikasaya. What that means is um, uh, uh, Sudabde means ocean of ambrosia, ocean of nectar, ocean of ambrosia means it implies amrita, the nectar of immortality. Karuna Apurna, the fullness of grace. Paramatman. This is all addressing Arunachala. He's addressing Arunachala firstly as the fullness of grace, the ocean of ambrosia, the Paramatman. And then he describes Arunachala by whose series of rays the solid form of the universe is swallowed. That is Kabalita Ganavishwarupa Kiranavalya, Arunachala Paramatman. And then finally the prayer is Aruno Baba Chitta Kanjusuvikasaya. Be the sun for the complete blossoming of the heart lotus, or implying my heart lotus. So that's a beautiful prayer. This is basically the same prayer that Bhagavan sang in verse 27 of Aksharamlai. In verse 27 of Aksharamlai, he sings Sakalamam Virangum Kadiroli Yenamana Jala Jamalati Arunachala. Arunachala, son of bright light, or Kadi Oli can mean either bright light or rays of light. So son of bright light or sun with rays of light. But swallows everything. Son of bright light, but swallows everything. Sakalam and Virangam means that swallows everything. Mana Jala Jamalati. Make the mind lotus blossom. So in both these verses, Bhagavan is addressing Arunachala as the sun, and he's praying to him to make the mind lotus blossom. In the when later Bhagavan composed the Arunachala Pancharatnam in Sanskrit in about 1917. The exact date of the first verse is not known, but the other verses were around July, August 1917. Later, in 1922, when other hymns were to be published in Tamil, a devotee, I think it was Ayasami, asked Bhagavan to translate the Sanskrit into Tamil. So the Tamil version of the first verse is Arul Nirevana Amadakadalai Virikadiral Yavum Virungum Aruna Giri Paramatma Ve Kila Ulapu Nandrai Viriti Paritiyaha Vilungu. This means this, more or less the same as the Sanskrit. He addresses Arunachala's ocean of Amrita, Amadakadalai. Arul Nirevana, which is the fullness of grace. Paramatma, he's addressing Arunachala as Paramatma. Paramatma means the supreme self or ultimate self. In other words, what we ultimately are, our own ultimate self. Arunagiri. In Sanskrit, he says Arunachala. In Tamil, he says Arunagiri. They both mean the same. Who swallow everything by your spreading rays. Shine as the sun, but makes my budding heart lotus blossom. That is one word that he adds in Tamil, but is not in the Sanskrit, is killer. Killer means that is just beginning to blossom. So his heart is already beginning to blossom. It should blossom fully. When he refers to, in all these three verses, that is the verse 27 of Aksharamlai and the Sanskrit and Tamil versions of this verse, he is referring to Arunachala as the sun. And it's by the light of the sun that the lotus blossoms. So what sort of sun is Arunachala? Arunachala is the sun of pure awareness. That is the light that is ever, Arunachala is that light of pure awareness. So it is like the sun, because as Bhagavan often said, the the world shines by the light of the mind, as he says, for example, as he implies, for example, in verse 7 of Uludunapadu, in which he doesn't refer directly to mind. He uses the word arivu, which means awareness, but he's referring, but by awareness in that context, he's referring to the mind or ego. What he says in verse 7 of Uludunapadu is, um, um, though the awareness and the world rise and subside simultaneously, it is only by the mind that the world shines, only by awareness that the world shines. The awareness by which the world shines, the awareness that rises and subsides with the world, is obviously the mind. So though he uses the word arivu there, he's not talking about the pure awareness, because the pure awareness is satchit. It doesn't rise or subside. It ever remains as it is. The awareness that rises and subsides is the mind or ego. So it is by the mind that the world shines. So the light by which the world shines is the mind. But what is the light by which the mind shines? The light by which the mind shines is the original light of pure awareness. That is, the mind or ego is the adjunct conflated awareness, I am this body. That adjunct conflated awareness is not the real awareness. It's chidabhasa. Chidabhasa means it's a likeness or semblance of awareness, or a reflection of awareness. The original awareness, the original light, is the light of pure awareness that ever shines as I am. So Arunachala, the sun, is that sun of pure awareness that is ever shining as I am, but illumines the mind, thereby enabling the mind to illumine the world. So the mind's light is a reflected light. Sometimes Bhagavan compared it to the light of the moon. That is the light of Arunachala, the light of pure awareness, is like the light of the sun. The moonlight is just a reflection of the sunlight. So at night, when the sunlight seems to be obscured by darkness, the objects of the world are illumined by the light of the moon. But the light of the moon is not the original light. The original light is the sunlight that reflects from the moon. So Arunachala is that sun of pure awareness. The mind is a the awareness by which the mind knows the world is a reflection of that light. So when Bhagavan refers to Arunachala as the sun, or in this verse, praise to Arunachala, in the Sanskrit verse, he says, be the sun. In the Tamil verse, he says, shine as the sun, to make the heart lotus blossom. So that is why he uses the analogy of the sun. But why does he use the analogy of a lotus blossoming? That is in this analogy, the immature lotus bud is analogous to the very impure mind. When the mind is very impure, it is bound tightly closed by its desires and attachments, asapasa. So the mind that is tightly bound by desires and attachments is like a tightly closed lotus bud. But every day the lotus bud is exposed to the light of the sun, so it slowly, slowly begins to mature. So when he describes it as the killer ulapu, ulapu means the heart flower, or implies lotus in this context. Killer means it's beginning to swell up and to open, it's getting ready to open. So that is analogous to the state of a mature spiritual aspirant whose heart is beginning to swell with bhakti. Even that bhakti comes from where? Just like the swelling of the lotus swells only because of the light of the sun that falls on it every day. The devotion that rises in the heart of the devotee is only by the grace of Arunachala. That is, the nature of ego, as Bhagavan says, for example, in verse 25 of Uludunapadu, Urupatri undam, urupatri nekam. Grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping inferior forms, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. So the very nature of ego is to constantly grasp form. Form means anything other than itself, because ego is, as Bhagavan says in that same verse, ego is a formless Pei. Pei means a phantom or an evil spirit or a pisasa, a demon. And it is uruvatra. Uruvatra means it's formless. So ego has no form of its own. It comes into existence and stands only by grasping form. So the very nature of ego is to grasp form. That means to grasp things other than itself. So the nature of ego is to have Vishaya vasanas. Vishaya vasanas are the inclination to grasp Vishayas, things other than itself. So from where can the love to turn within and hold on to the light of pure awareness, from where can that love come? It can come only from Arunachala, from Arunachala means our own real nature, Paramatman, what we actually are. That is the source of whatever bhakti we have. So if we have even an iota of love to turn within and surrender ourselves to Bhagavan, that love comes only from him. It's only by his grace that we have that love. So this lotus is swelling up with that love, ready to blossom. And that love is given only by being bathed in the sunlight every day. Slowly, slowly it gains that maturity and begins to blossom. So what Bhagavan asked for is Nandrai Viri Parityaha Vilangu. Parity means the halo or circle, or it's a name of the sun. So shine as the sun, uh, 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 causing the heart to blossom. Nandrai means well, very well. In Sanskrit, he says suvikasaya. Su means well, thoroughly, completely. And Nandrai implies the same. So this partially blossomed flower, Bhagavan's heart is welling up with bhakti. He's praying to it. Of course, Bhagavan has attained it. I mean, Bhagavan's heart is fully blossomed, of course, but he's singing this prayer from the perspective of a devotee whose heart is beginning to swell up with bhakti, but is not yet fully blossomed. And as he says in this is a bit similar to the prayer in the first verse of Arunachala Patikam. In Arunachala Patikam, he begins by saying in the first sentence, if you who by your grace took possession of me are not gracious, giving me sight of you, in other words, enabling me to see you, what will be my state if I leave this body, pining and suffering intensely in this dark and miserable world? So this is basically a prayer for Arunachala to give his darshanam to the devotee. Arunachala is already seen by the devotee in name and form, but when Bhagavan prays Unkakshi Tandu, giving your kakshi, your kakshi means more or less the same as darshanam, giving your sight of view. What he is implying here is not just the sight of Arunachala in name and form, but Arunachala in his true form, as he praised in one of the verses of Aksharam, Jyoti Urukat, show your form of light. So the light of pure awareness. So Bhagavan is here praying for Arunachala to reveal himself as he actually is, to show himself as he actually is, to enable the devotee to see him as he actually is. And then in the next sentence, he says, Arunane Kanadu Alaramo Kamalam. That means without seeing the sun will a lotus blossom. And then he concludes by addressing Arunachala as being the sun to the sun. O love called the great Aruna hill. That is, he addresses Arunachala as Ambe, as love itself. As he says in the next verse, Amburu Arunachala. Arunachala, the very form of love, the very nature of love, the Ambu Swarupa, the one whose very nature is love. So he addresses Arunachala directly here as, "O love, called the great Aruna hill, where grace surges forth as a spring, gushing forth abundantly." So the implication in this last thing is, just like the lotus cannot blossom without seeing the sun, can my heart lotus blossom without seeing you? So when he prays in this first verse of Pancharatnam to, to Arunachala to be the sun to blossom his heart, that means enable me to see you as you actually are so that my heart lotus may blossom. And of course, the fully blossomed heart lotus is that is the closed heart lotus. The tightly closed heart lotus is ego. When it fully blossomed, it's when ego dissolves and merges back in its source, the light of pure awareness. So this is the prayer here. So as I say, the other verses we can understand as being an elucidation or commentary on this. So in the next verse, in this verse, he's described Arunachala as in this first verse, as the ocean of nectar, of ambrosia. That means an ocean of immortality. The nectar of Amrita is the nectar of immortality. So it's the ocean of immortality, and it's the fullness of grace. Once when Bhagavan was asked what exactly he means by Karuna Apurna or Arul Nirevu, the fullness of grace, Bhagavan said, not even giving mukti is the fullness of grace, though that is the ultimate gift of grace is the bestowal of mukti, but grace in its fullness has to be equally available to all. So what is the fullness of grace? The fullness of grace is the shining of eye in the heart of each and every jiva. That is, Arunachala, or God, is so gracious that he always makes himself available to us as our nearest and dearest. So he's ever shining in our heart as our own self, as I. So this is the implication of Karuna Apurna, or Arul Nirevu, the fullness of grace, is that shining of Arunachala in our heart. So he points out that he implies the same in the next verse, but he says a bit more about Arunachala. It's not only the sun that will swallow everything. So what is if Arunachala is the sun whose bright rays will swallow everything, then what is the relationship between Arunachala and everything that it will swallow? That he explains in the first half of this second verse. In Sanskrit, he says, Tvai Arunachala Sarvam Bhutva Stitva Praliname Tachitram. That means Tvai Arunachala Sarvam. Tvai means in you, Arunachala. Sarvam. Sarvam means all, or implying all, or etat. Etat means this. So sarvam etat is all this. Bhutva, stitva, pralinam, chitram. That is all this. All this world is a mental is a picture. Chitram means picture. Bhutva, it comes into existence. Stitva, it's sustained, and pralinam, it is destroyed in you. So in you, Arunachala, all this, which is a mental picture, comes into existence, is sustained, and is destroyed. Shridi aham iti atmataya nrityasi. As oneself, you dance in that. As oneself means as Atman, you dance in the heart as I. Boste Vadanti Hridayam Nama. For you, they say the name is, they say heart is the name. And likewise in Tamil, he's saying, Chittiramam Ishdellam Semalaye Nimbale Uttidamai Nindre Odungidomal. That means he addresses Arunachala here as Semale, as Red Hill. Red Hill. All this, implying the entire world appearance, Chittiramam, which is a picture, implying which is a mental picture, arises, stands, and subsides only in you. He said nimbale. The nimbal means in you. Nimbale means only in you. So everything arises, stands, and subsides in you. So firstly, Arunachal is that in which everything else is contained. But not only is it that in which everything else is contained, it is also the heart of everything. Heart means the center. So it is both the center and that which contains everything. So it's a beautiful contrast here. In the second half of the verse in Tamil, he says, Nityamum nanendru ideyam naditu tiduvayal tam unpe unpetan idiom enduvatam. That means, since you dance eternally in the heart as I, they say your name itself is heart. So Arunachal is that in which everything appears, stands, and disappears. So it's that which contains everything, but it is also the heart of everything. The heart means the center. And he says, since you dance eternally in the heart as I. So what is it but is in the heart? Heart means the center. So whatever is in the heart, that is, if something other than the heart were in the heart, that other thing that is in the heart would be the heart of the heart. But so when Bhagavan says you dance eternally in the heart, he implies you dance eternally in the heart as the heart. That is, that which is in the heart is only the heart. So since you dance eternally in the heart as I, so I is the heart, and they say your name itself is heart. That is, Arunachal is itself the heart in which it dances. So when we try and conceive it with our mind, it's how can the heart be in the heart? But the heart, that is, it's just, this is the limitation of language. When we talk about something being in the heart, what is in the heart is only the heart, nothing but the heart. So that which is dancing in the heart as I, that is Arunachal. Therefore, Arunachal itself is the heart. Arunachal is the heart, Arunachal is I. And that I is what contains all this appearance. So how can all this appearance appear in the heart when the heart is the center of everything? That is, when Bhagavan says that it is a chitram, a picture, he implies it is a mental picture, as he makes clear in so many other places, in Uludunapto, Nana, and everything. But the entire world is just a dream, as Bhagavan makes clear. And a dream is just a mental picture. So the dream appears only in the mind of the dreamer. But Arunachal is not the dreamer. Arunachal is the fundamental awareness that ever shines of the pure I, in which the dreamer, which is the adjunct conflated awareness, the dreamer is ego. So ego is the adjunct conflated awareness, I am this body. So the heart of the false awareness, I am this body, is the real awareness I. That real awareness I, or I am, that is Arunachala. So he is the heart of the ego in which everything appears. So ego has no, that is, the heart means it is also, it's both the source and the substance of everything else. So Arunachala is both the source from which everything appears and that in which everything appears, because everything appears only in the view of ego. And ego appears, cannot have any existence other than the pure I. So everything ultimately is contained in Arunachala, and Arunachala is contained in everything. So in this verse, Bhagavan reveals the real greatness of Arunachala. It is that in which everything is contained, and that which is contained within everything. So Arunachala is both immanent and transcendent. It transcends everything because everything is contained in it. And it's also immanent because it's in everything. So there's never a time or place where Arunachala is not present. In the heart of every sentient being, Arunachala is what is shiny as I. As Bhagavan sang in another verse when he was asked his true identity, Ariyatitara Jivara Dahavari Jagohayil Arivairami Paramatuman Arunachala Ramanan. That is, Arunachala Ramanan is Paramatman. The same Paramatman he referred to in the previous verse of this song. Um, which Rami. Rami means it exists blissfully. Arivai, as awareness, in the cave of the heart lotus of all different jivas, beginning with Hari. Hari means Lord Vishnu. So from the highest God down to the smallest, most insignificant insect or smallest sentient being there is, that which is shiny as awareness, as the awareness eye in all, is Arunachala. So he is that which is contained in everything and in which everything is contained. So how are we to know him as such? That he is what he takes up in the third verse. Since Arunachala is showing what is always shining in our heart as eye, always dancing in our heart as eye, how are we to know him? So in the third verse, Bhagavan sings, Ahamiti kuta ayati ambishya. That means by an extremely immaculate mind. Oh, oh no, sorry. Let me read more. Ahamiti kutas ayati iti ambishya anta pravishtaya ati mala ati amala dia Abhagamya swam rupam samyatyarunachala tvainadi vabdo. The meaning of that is by an extremely immaculate mind. He says not just amaladi, he says ati amaladi. It's extremely immaculate mind. Uh, uh, investigating. Investigate is ambitya, from where one has come as I. So now we have risen as I. So from where have we risen as I? Investigating that, anta pravishtaya, entering within, uh, avagamya swam rupam, coming to know one's own form, the form of oneself. Form here, rupam implies swarupam, our own real nature. Coming to know our own real nature by entering within, by investigating who, from where we have risen as I, one will cease or subside or become quiescent in you, Arunachala, like a river in the ocean. So just like a river merges and loses its separate identity in the ocean, we will merge and lose our separate identity in Arunachala when, by an extremely pure or immaculate mind, when we investigate from where we have risen as I, and thereby entering within and coming to know what we actually are, we will thereby merge in him. That is, it's only when we know him, when we know our own real nature, will we know him as he really is. Because Atma Swarupa is our natural Swarupa. That is, his real nature is our real nature. So only by knowing our own real nature can we know our nature as he really is. And when we know him, as Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Upadesh Undya, Tanai iritle, tanai aridalam. Being oneself alone is knowing oneself. So we can know our real nature only by being our real nature. And since our real nature is our nature, knowing ourselves as we actually are is like a river merging in the ocean and losing its separate identity in the ocean. Likewise, in Tamil, he says, Ahamukama anda amala mati tannal ahamidu tan engu erum endru ainde ahavuruve nangu arindu munnie nadipolum oyume ungan arunachalane or. That means by that immaculate mind, which is completely ahamukam. Ahamukam is a beautiful word in Tamil because mukam is a Sanskrit word that means face or facing. So in Sanskrit, the two commonly used words are bahirmukam, which means facing outwards, and antamukam, which means facing inwards. But instead of antamukam, in Tamil, Bhagavan often used the term ahamukam, which has a very nice meaning in Tamil because there are two words in Tamil, aham. That is, the Sanskrit pronoun I is aham, which is often used in Tamil. Um, aham is also a word in Tamil, but means inside or interior or heart or home. So ahamukam means both facing inside and facing I. It has a double meaning, but the two meanings actually amount to the same because sorry, because according to Bhagavan, facing I alone is truly facing inwards. That is, everything other than I is bahya, is external to ourselves, extraneous to ourselves. Only so facing inwards means what Bhagavan, when Bhagavan talks about antamukam, facing inwards, he means ahamukam, facing towards I. So it's a very nice term he uses. So by that immaculate mind that is completely ahamukam, that is completely inward facing or selfward facing or self-attentive, investigating where this I itself rises, and thereby clearly knowing the form, or he says in Tamil, he says, aha, aha uruve, aha uruve, that is the form of I, the in form again, like in Sanskrit, where he talks about svam rupam there means swarupam, the swarupa of oneself. Here he talks about the swarupa of I, the real nature of I. So only by investigating from where this I rises, one will certainly cease in you, Arunachala, like a river in the ocean. And then he ends with one word in Tamil, or. Or means investigate. So the implication is that he's telling us, investigate what you actually are. When Bhagavan talks about investigating where I rises, what exactly does he mean? Where does I rise? But obviously the I that rises is not the pure I. The pure I never rises. The pure I is pure being, Satchit. The I that rises is ego. So from where does this I, this ego I rise? It can only rise from, that is, ego rises in waking and dream, it subsides in sleep. So where it rises and where it subsides has to be what exists in the absence of ego. So what exists in the absence of ego? As Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Ulujunapadu, ahande undayan anatumundahum. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ahande indrail indru anatum. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. That means, why does he say that? Because everything means everything that is known by ego, all phenomena, all forms, all objects, they exist only in the view of ego. So they come into existence only when ego comes into existence, and they cease to exist when ego ceases to exist. As we know from our own experience, in waking and dream, we rise as ego and we become aware of all this multiplicity. In sleep, we as ego subside and all awareness and multiplicity subsides along with us. So what exists in the absence of ego cannot be any object or phenomenon. It can only be that which exists in the absence of ego, which is what is ever existing, namely Satchit, the pure awareness I am. So where ego rises, that is, ego is the adjunct conflated awareness, I am this body. From where did this adjunct conflated awareness, I am this body, rise? Only from the pure awareness I am. So when he says investigating where this I rises, he means investigating our own reality, investigating what we actually are. So investigating where or investigating who amounts to the same, because what we actually are is itself the source from which we have risen as ego. So whether he describes it as investigating who am I or what am I or where am I or from where do I rise, it all amounts to the same thing. It's all investigating this fundamental awareness I am. So this is the path of Jnana he's describing here. So these first three verses, all tie together very neatly, because he says Arunach is that which will swallow everything. When he makes the heart lotus blossom, how is the heart lotus to blossom? It can blossom, as he implies in in the first verse of Arunach Patikam, when he says, um, um, uh, Arunanai Kanadu Alaramo Kamalam. And without seeing the sun will a lotus blossom. So how is the lotus to see to blossom? It's only by seeing Arunacha, the sun of that is ever shining in the heart as I. So in this third verse, he's describing how how the mind is to see that pure eye. The mind, firstly, it has to be extremely pure, because only the impurities in the mind are all the vasanas, which are what rises likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on, all the Vishaya vasanas. These are the impurities. So long as the Vishaya vasanas are very strong, the mind won't be willing to turn within. It won't be willing to become ahamukam. So the mind, in order to turn within and become uh, completely ahamukam, that's what is implied by the word "are." "Are" means, which implies it's completely ahamukam. You will become completely ahamukam only when it's extremely pure, when it's freed of all its Vishaya vasanas. So that is why that bhakti that is making the lotus begin to swell, that bhakti is so important. That's why Bhagavan often said, bhakti is the mother of jnana. Because without all-consuming, we cannot turn within without thereby surrendering ourselves completely. That is, by turning within and knowing ourselves as we actually are, we will merge in our natural, like a river merging in the ocean. So we must be willing to surrender ourselves completely in order to turn within. As Bhagavan says in the concluding sentence of verse 26 of uh, of Uludunaptu, when he's after saying, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, Adalal, Yadu idu entru nadle, ovadal yavamenor. Therefore, know that investigating what this is giving up everything. So we will not be willing to investigate what we actually are until we are willing to give up everything. So that requires a great, only when we have all consuming love to know and to be what we actually are, namely our natural Ramana, is what we actually are. Only when we have great love to know and to be uh, what we always actually are, will we be willing to surrender ourselves completely? So that great love is necessary, and that love can come only by the grace of Arunacha, by the grace of Bhagavan, because the nature of ego is to go outwards and constantly grasp other things. So to get the love to let go of other things and to turn within, that love can only come from Arunachala, which is what is always shining in our heart as I. So all these verses are so nicely tied together. And why is everything swallowed by Arunachala? Because everything exists only in the view of ego. When ego is, when ego, when by seeing Arunachala as he actually is, in other words, seeing ourselves as we actually are, when ego thereby blossoms, everything is swallowed. Because ego is swallowed, everything is swallowed along with it. So all these verses tie together so neatly. But then to proceed to the next two verses, as I said, Kavirgant had asked Bhagavan to compose, since he composed one verse on jnana, he should also compose a verse on yoga and bhakti and karma. He is what Kavirgant had asked Bhagavan. So in the next verse, he touches upon the subject of uh, of yoga. What he says in the next verse in Sanskrit is Chaktva Vishyam Bahyam, giving up external phenomena. Rudra pranena, Rudra manasantas, uh, uh, Rudra manasa anta tvam dhyayam pasyati yogi diditim arunachala tvai mahiyante. Arunachala, giving up external phenomena and contemplating you within by a mind restrained by the restrained breath, the yogi sees the light, uh, thereby they are exalted in you. Well, thereby is not there, but the implication is they are exalted in you. Implies thereby they are exalted in you. Um, so um, he begins this verse. I'll read the Tamil also, but so I can explain them both together. In what he says in Tamil is "Veli vidayangale vittu." Sorry, that I'm reading. "Veli vidayam vittu," giving up external objects. External vidayam means vishayam, external objects, phenomena. So in Sanskrit he says vishayam, in Tamil he says vidayam, which is a Tamil form of it. So giving up external phenomena. Bilangam Arunesa, Arunesa who shine. He's addressing Arunacha, that is. Arunesa, that makes it as an address. Valiyadaka Nikum Manatal, by the mind which stands when the breath is subdued or controlled, brought under, subdued. By that mind, Ulamadanil, in the heart, unne dhyanitu, meditating on you in the heart, contemplating you in the heart, yogi oli kanam, the yogi sees the light. Unnil veavu urum, they attain greatness in you. Iduun, consider this or know this. So, what Bhagavan says here, first he describes Arunachala as Bilangam Arunesa, Arunachala who shine. What does he mean by Arunachala who shine? Arunachala is Swayam Prakasa. It shines by the light of its own awareness. So Arunachala is the light of pure awareness. So it's ever shiny as the light of pure awareness, which is what this implies the same as what he said in the second verse. You're always dancing in the heart as I. So that's addressing Arunachala. Arunachala who shine, implying who shine at the light of pure awareness. Then he describes what the yogi has to do. Giving up external phenomena. In other words, withdrawing the mind from everything external, contemplating you in the heart. So when the mind has given up all external phenomena and contemplates you in the heart, what does he mean by contemplating you in the heart? Firstly, what is in the heart, as we saw earlier, is Arunachala is always dancing in the heart as I. So contemplating you in the heart implies contemplating you as I, meditating on you as I. As he says in verse 8 of Upadesha Undya, Anya bhavatin avanahamahum ananya bhavame undipara anatinum utumu mundipara. Rather than anya bhava, rather than meditating on God as something other than oneself, ananya bhava in which he is I. That is meditation on him as not other than oneself, in which he is I. That is, with the understanding that he is always, what is always shining in the heart as I, as Bhagavan had said in the second verse of this Pancharatnam, with that understanding, meditating on him not as other than oneself, but as oneself alone, that is the best, anatim, that is the best among all. So that's what Bhagavan implies here when he says, contemplating you in the heart, by a mind that stands motionless, but by a mind that stands motionless when restraining the breath, the yogi sees the light. That what is the light that the yogi sees? The light of pure awareness, but is always shining in our heart as I, which is Arunachala. So by meditating on Arunachala, the light of pure awareness in the heart, the yogi thereby sees that light. And how do we see, how can a yogi see the light? As Bhagavan says in the final sentence of verse 21 of Uludunapadu, Unadal Khan, um, becoming food is seeing. That is, only when we are swallowed by that light are we truly seeing that light. We can see that light only by being that light, and we can be that light only by being swallowed by it. So when Bhagavan said the yogi sees the light, it implies the yogi is swallowed by that light, and thereby he attains exaltation or greatness in you. So though these verses makes an indirect reference to pranayama and refers to the yogi and refers to the aspirant as a yogi, actually what Bhagavan is describing in this verse is the same as the previous verse. Because when he's here, he says, contemplating you in the heart. That is what he referred to in the previous verse as investigating where this eye rises. Where the eye rises, obviously only the heart, the arunachal, which is ever shining in the heart as the pure eye. So the implication, though Bhagavan is using different words, what he implies in this verse is the same as what he said more explicitly in the previous verse. Because Arunachal is that which is shining as pure awareness. Once we've given up external phenomena, what else is there to see? As the words he begins this, he uses at the beginning of this verse in Tamil, Veli Vedayam Vittu. He uses almost exactly the same words in the verse 16 of Upadesha Veli Videngale Vittu, giving up external phenomena. Manam tan oli uru ordale, the mind knowing its own form of light, unme unichiam. That alone is true awareness. So the mind knowing its own form of light means what? Its form of light means the light of pure awareness. When the mind knows its own, that light of pure awareness, it ceases to be mind and merges in that like a river in the ocean. So all these verses, if we consider all these verses together, we can see how Bhagavan is, whether it's in Upadesha or Uludunapadu or in Jnana or Aksharamlay or Pancharatnam or Patikam or wherever, Bhagavan is always talking about the same subject. He's just expressing it in so many different beautiful ways. But the import of all of Bhagavan's teachings is that we need to turn within and know ourselves as we actually are. Sorry, I have to rush now. I've only got 5 minutes. And the last verse is a very important verse also. I'll quickly go through this. In the 5th verse, he says, Tvaya pita manasatvam pasyam sarvam tabakriteya satatam bhajate ananya pritya sajayati arunachala tvai sukhe magnaha. Arunachala, seeing you by a mind that is surrendered to you, one who, without otherness, or without otherness, lovingly adores or worships everything as your form, triumphs, immersed in happiness in you. And the Tamil version is Unnidatil oppuvittu ullatal eporidum, unne kandu, ellamum unnuruvai, anniyamil ambuseyum, unknown, arunachala, velhum imburu bam unnilande. That means, Arunachala, seeing you always by a mind that is surrendered to you, one who without otherness loves everything as your form or nature, triumphs, drowning in you who are the form of bliss. This is a beautiful verse to round off all of these. That is, in this verse, Bhagavan, because Kavyaganta asked Bhagavan to write about bhakti, here he talks about surrender. But how can the mind be surrendered to Arunachala? Only by turning within. And he says here he says, seeing you always by a mind that is surrendered to you. What is a mind that is surrendered to Arunachala? When the mind is surrendered to Arunachala, it merges in Arunachala like a river in the ocean. So seeing you always by a mind surrendered in you implies seeing you always by being you. Because only when the mind is completely surrendered, when it has merged completely in Arunachala, are we truly seeing Arunachala. Tana iritale, tanna aritlam, as he says in verse 26 of Upadesh Undya. Being oneself alone is knowing oneself. So we can see Arunachala only by being Arunachala. So seeing him always, when he says always, that means not only in waking and dream, also in sleep. It means not only in the present and future, but also in the past. Seeing you eternally is what he implies by seeing you always. And how can we see him always? Only by completely surrendering the mind to him. Only by the mind that is surrendered to him and that is completely merged in him, become one with him, can we truly see him as he actually is. And when we have surrendered and merged in him, what do we see? We see only him. So when Bhagavan says, one who without otherness loves everything as your form, we can love everything as the form of Arunachala only if we see everything as the form of Arunachala. And we can see everything as the form of Arunachala only if we see Arunachala as he actually is. And when we see Arunachala as he actually is, he will swallow everything. That is, he alone will remain shining. When we see a rope as a snake, we don't see it as a rope. When we see the snake as a rope, we no longer see it as a snake, we see it as a rope. What it always actually is a rope. So when Bhagavan says seeing everything as your form, he means seeing that you alone are the one reality that previously appeared as everything. And then only when we see everything as his form and see ourselves as his form, can we truly love without otherness. So thereby we drown in him who is the ocean of bliss. So I could have said more about this, but I've come to the end of the 1 hour. So this is such a beautiful, like every work of Bhagavan, each work of Bhagavan, when we take it and think about it deeply, what Bhagavan is saying, every work looks so complete in itself and looks, oh, this is the very best of all of Bhagavan's works. And when we look at the next one, oh, this is the very best, because Bhagavan has such a way of, whatever he does is so perfect. So this is such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful song and such an apt ending conclusion to Arunachala Stuti Panchakam. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Arunachala Ramanaya.